Give me a thumbs up if you remember learning about two-way frequency tables last year. Oh. Did you guys not learn about this last year?
I don't remember.
No idea.
All right, perfect. This is going to be brand new information then, which is fine. It just might be a little confusing, but hopefully it won't be too bad. So frequency, when you hear the word frequency, what do you think of?
Amount of time something happens.
Amount of time something happens. I heard someone say sound, which is great. Different frequency, but you're absolutely right. Frequency, if I say I do something frequently, am I doing it once, twice, a bunch of times? Multiple times, a bunch of times, right? So a two-way frequency table shows us how often certain data intersections occur within a sample. And when I say sample, I'm talking about the data set that we're given. Right, this is going to be a context-heavy unit, so what we're talking about in the problem matters a lot to understanding and kind of explicating our answers to the questions that we're given. All right, based on this first table you see, what is one data set we're comparing here? This is a two-way, so there's two data sets we're comparing. What do you think one of them is? Alex?
The male and females are all the sports.
Perfect. Male and female. That's my first data set. So your gender, one of the two in this case. What's the other data set we're comparing that against?
3 sports.
The 3 sports. Right, and as we'll see down here, this is favorite sports. Okay? So what do you think this 13 means in the context of this problem? 13 what? Male students prefer what? Volleyball. That's why it's an intersection. If I cover up everything else, you see that 13 is the intersection of male students and volleyball. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How many male students say basketball is their favorite sport? 15. Because if I cover up this and I cover up that, and I can't cover up anymore, there we go. Male and basketball, the intersection is 15. How many female students say football is their favorite sport? 13. Okay, so we can read this table pretty easily, right? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. All right. How many total students now? This is where we're going to get to, we'll build up to this in a second, but how many total students, regardless of gender, say they prefer basketball as their favorite sport? 21? Very close?
No, 36.
Oh, 31. How'd you get 31, Davis? 15 plus 16 equals 31. So we'll notice that my bottom row is total and my far right hand side column is my totals. These are called my margins. Like on a piece of binder paper, where are your margins at? Like off to the side. Yeah, not in the middle. That's what margin means. How many total students say they prefer volleyball now, regardless of gender? What do you guys think? 36. How'd you get 36? Adding them all together, all 6 of these numbers together?
No, adding the male and female volleyball.
That's right. We look just at volleyball. We add those up. We get 36. And how many total students prefer football? 33. We add down. We get 33. Okay, right now we're just building up our understanding of what's going on in this table. Now, we brought our columns down. Let's bring our rows over. How many total male students were a part of this sample?
48.
48. How'd you get 48?
Added all the male total students.
13 plus 15 plus 20 equals, what did you say was 48?
48, yes.
And how many total female students were interviewed? 52. How'd you get 52?
Adding all the male.
Add it up all the way across, gives me 52. Now, if we've done this right, we should see that my answer to number 6, we can get that answer 2 different ways. How many total students were surveyed? Well, let's look. There's 48 male students, 52 female students. Altogether, how many students is that? 100. I'll do it in gray. Let's look at the sports, right? If I cover up everything but the totals for my sports, 36 students preferred volleyball, 31 preferred basketball, 33 preferred football. What's 36 plus 31 plus 33? 100. So again, if I've done this right, both columns should converge to the same number down here. Okay, this is what, at least I like to call my grand total. So when you hear me mention what's my grand total, I'm referring to that bottom right-hand number on my table. Give me a thumbs up if you're with me so far. Cool. Does this look familiar at all? Have we seen a table that kind of looks like this before? Where? In math? Where in math? In my class? Where specifically in my class, Tyler? The whiteboard. What was on the whiteboard before? The Spirit Week 2-way frequency table. We've made this and worked this out already before. In fact, you've won it twice now, right? Yeah. That is a frequency table. It's the frequency of students in class and spirit, right? Students can have spirit or not have spirit. Students can be in class or not be in class. Those are the 2 ways that we're counting frequency. And as you guys know, the class with the highest frequency of present students with spirit was the winner throughout the week. So let's get more specific. We kind of already went through this. How many male students prefer football as their favorite sport? 20. We're just pulling this right off the table. We're talking about totals, right? We're not even going to get into percentages just yet. We're just pulling out raw numbers. How many female students prefer volleyball? 23. Again, we're just looking at the table for the intersections here. What's the intersection of male students and basketball as their favorite sport? 15. And what about female students in basketball? 16. So, I'm going to give you guys a second to answer this question. Based on all the data collected above, there's no right, there's no wrong answers. Just draw a conclusion real quick about the relationship in this instance between gender and sports preference. Okay, take like 60 seconds, see what you can come up with. You got to write something. There's no wrong answers. Just make an inference based on what we just talked about. It could be anything that's supported by the data. Anybody want to share their conclusion that they drew about this data real quick? Yeah, Aaron, what'd you say? Perfect. Great observation. There was more female students in this survey than males. It's definitely supported by the data because we have the totals right there by gender. Great job. Alex?
Most students like volleyball the most.
Yeah. Regardless of gender, most students preferred volleyball. We see that again from these totals down here. It's a great conclusion backed up by our data. Great job. Anything else? There's tons of things we could say. Right? We could say who typically prefers football more, male students or female students? Male students by a pretty large margin. Can we say the same thing about basketball? Not really. Why not? Because they're almost the same. Maybe there was one male student who loves basketball that was absent that day, right? We can't say, oh, female students prefer basketball over male students. Yeah, Aaron? See that? 13 is the mode? Yeah, it would be, because there's two 13s. That's a great little callback to our first lesson. Absolutely. Thankfully, we're not going to have to do any of that mean, mode, median stuff. This is basically a completely different aspect of statistics than what we've been talking about with mean and IQR and standard deviation. This is a whole different, that's why it's 9.7. It's separate. Does that make sense for that first part? Okay, perfect. Let's get the second piece to glue in. We'll actually get into the percentages here. Now that we understand what we're doing, we can actually do the math part of it. We're not understanding what we're dealing with. Davis is high. Everybody glued in? No? Okay, so number 11 is asking us, now that we got all our totals and raw numbers out of the way, what is the marginal frequency of students who prefer volleyball? We're going to talk about two different types of frequencies, marginal frequency and joint relative frequency. Now, it's really easy to get confused between the two. When you hear margins, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Paper. Someone said paper. Where are the margins on your paper? Tyler? On the sides, right? On the outsides, in the bottom. Question? Oh. What's that? Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The margins on the paper are on the outside, right? So when I'm thinking about a marginal frequency, I should be focused on my outside numbers, my totals. Those are my margins. Okay? So the marginal frequency of students who prefer volleyball. Students who prefer volleyball. Does it specify which gender we're talking about? No, it does not. Just talking about students that prefer volleyball. Okay. Well, first we've got to find the total number of students that prefer volleyball. If I look back at my table, how many total students, regardless of gender, say volleyball is their favorite sport? 36, right here in my margins, right? Just like the marginal frequency is asking for. 36 students prefer volleyball. How many students did we ask? 100. There's where my grand total comes in. 100. So, if I want to find the percentage of students who prefer volleyball, I'll take 36 divided by 100. What is 36 over 100? 0.36. If I turn that into a percentage, what is that? 36%. So this tells me, of all the students I asked, 36% say volleyball is their favorite sport. Give me a thumbs up if you're following that logic. It's nice and easy when there's 100 on the bottom, right? It's not always going to be the case. What is the marginal relative frequency of students who prefer basketball? Think about it for a second. See if you could set up a fraction for me. Marginal relative frequency of students who prefer basketball. What do you think my numerator is going to be? 31? Where'd you get 31?
Total table.
Basketball and total. Boom. 31. What's my denominator going to be? 100, my grand total, the total number of people in the survey. 31 divided by 100 is 0.31. As a percentage, what is that? 31%. So right away we can draw a conclusion. Which sport is more popular at this school, volleyball or basketball? Volleyball, not by a huge margin, but statistically speaking, yeah, volleyball is more popular at this school amongst both genders than basketball. But it's not just the sport. We could flip it to the other way, right? Two-way frequency. One way is the sport, the other way is the gender. What's the marginal relative frequency of female students in the survey? Where can I go to find that, you think?
Add up all the females together.
Add up all the females together. Luckily, we already did that, right? How many total female students were in the survey? 52. How many total students were surveyed? 100. 0.52. How can I write that as a percentage? 52%. And again, a conclusion we can draw from that statistic is there's more female students at this school than male. Might not necessarily be true, but based on the data, that's a conclusion we can draw. And again, it's not by a large margin, but there is a 4% swing there. All right? Marginal frequency. Any questions I can answer about that? I know we're going kind of quick, but I want to give you guys plenty of time. This worksheet is a beast, so we got to at least get started on it today. Joint relative frequency. Joint. When you think of joint, what do you think of? Together. It's a good one. If I think about my elbow joint right here, it connects this part of my arm with this part of my arm. My knee joint connects this part of my leg with this part of my leg. So join together, right? So a joint frequency is not going to be in the margins. If I'm not looking at my numbers in the margins, what numbers am I looking at? All my numbers in the middle. Right? I'll do it in what color? We'll do it in yellow. These are my non-marginal numbers. Each of these numbers is the intersection of two data points. Female in basketball, 16. Male in football, 20. Male in volleyball, 13. That's where the joint comes into play. I'm joining up a specific gender with a specific sport. Marginal, we're talking about totals. Joint, we're talking about the inside, the smaller ones, okay? Another way I like to think about it, I don't know, have you guys ever heard of jail referred to as the joint? Like, oh, I got thrown in the joint, see? Okay, some of us have, some of you have seen some old movies. So all these numbers here are locked up in this jail. They're all in the middle, they're in the joint. That's one way that I like to think about it, okay? So when I see, hey, it's asking me for the joint frequency, I'm looking at these numbers in the middle, because they're all locked up, okay? You guys heard the clink? Throw me in the clink? No? That's even older. All right, anyway. Joint relative frequency of females, okay, see, here we are. We're talking about females who prefer volleyball. Not just students, we're getting more specific. The intersection of female students and volleyball is represented by what number? 23. Female volleyball, boom, 23. We're still going to use our grand total. Because we're asking of all the students at this school, what percentage of them are both female and prefer volleyball? Well, what is 23 divided by 100? 0.23, which is 23%. So of all the different options, we have 6 different options here. About a quarter of the students fall under this one joint preference, I guess we could say. What about the joint relative frequency of males who prefer volleyball? How many males prefer volleyball as their favorite sport? 13. How many students did we survey? 100. Well, what's 13 divided by 100? 0.13. As a percentage, that would be 13%. This is a softball of a question right here, but it's how we can draw conclusions based on the data. Who is more likely to prefer volleyball, male or female students? How do you know? Take a second, in the 60 seconds we'll say, to answer that. We're just comparing those percentages, right? Who's more likely to prefer volleyball? Yeah, we'll keep it pushing. What do you guys say? Who's more likely, male students or female students? Female students are more likely. And we could even say are almost twice as likely. To prefer volleyball over any other sport. You can write whatever you want, as long as it makes sense to you. Right, and the reason why getting this data is important, well, not important, but something we can do with it, right, is if we say, okay, here's, you guys are the 100 students. Let's pretend there's 100 of you in here, which sounds like a nightmare for me, but if there's 100 of you in here, the odds of me randomly picking one of you and being both a female student and being a student who says volleyball is their favorite sport, I got about a 23% chance of picking you. Whereas picking someone that's both a male student and a student that says volleyball is their favorite sport, I have a much lower chance, right? Now you may be wondering, well, who cares? Good question. I don't know. I mean, I kind of care. Hopefully you care. Any questions I can answer about that? Perfect.